My name is Liam Kendrick, and for the better part of my 42 years, I have spoken the language of the earth. I am a landscape designer and arborist, a custodian of green and growing things. My world is one of patience, of understanding the slow, silent work that happens beneath the surface. I live in Oak Haven, a small city nestled in the misty embrace of the Pacific Northwest, a place where the air smells of damp soil and cedar, and the seasons are painted in 1,000 shades of green. My life, much like my work, is quiet, deliberate, and rooted in the belief that true strength is not loud, but resilient. My daughter, Anya, is the single most beautiful thing I have ever helped to grow. At 15, she possesses a wisdom that belies her years, her view of the world framed by the lens of the old film camera she carries everywhere. She sees the truth in things, the way light falls on a moss-covered stone, the subtle fracture in a forced smile. We live in a modest cedar-shingled house we call the Brambles, surrounded by a garden that is less a manicured lawn and more a curated wilderness, a testament to a decade of my life's work and love. It is our sanctuary. This story is not about revenge, though some might call it that. It is about pruning, about the painful but necessary act of cutting away what is diseased to allow for new, healthy growth. It begins, as these things often do, with a phone call, a single conversation that laid bare the rot that had been spreading, unseen, through the roots of our family for years. I can still see Anya's face in that moment, her expression a fragile pane of glass I was terrified of breaking. She was sitting at our large oak kitchen table, sketching in her notebook, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the worn wooden floor. I had just hung up the phone with my sister-in-law, Isabel. "What was that about, Dad?" Anya asked without looking up, her pencil still moving, capturing the curve of a fern frond. I leaned against the counter, the cold stone a stark contrast to the heat rising in my chest. I chose my words carefully, like placing stones in a garden path. "That was your Aunt Isabel," I said. "About her wedding." Anya's pencil stilled. She looked up, her large, perceptive eyes searching mine. "Oh, did she need help with the flower arrangements?" "I know you offered." I swallowed, the simple, innocent question a small, sharp pain. "No, sweetheart." She was calling to clarify the guest list. Anya waited, her silence more unnerving than any question. "She feels the wedding is going to be a very formal affair," I continued, the rehearsed, sanitized words feeling like ash in my mouth. "A certain kind of atmosphere. She thinks that we might feel out of place." Anya blinked slowly, processing. "Out of place?" she repeated, the words soft, incredulous. "We're her family." "Yes," I said. "We are." The full, unspoken truth hung in the air between us. "You are not the right kind of family. You don't belong." She was a 15-year-old girl who had spent her childhood making handcrafted birthday cards for this aunt, who had proudly shown Isabel her first photography prize. And now, she was being told she was an embarrassment, an unwelcome weed in a meticulously curated garden of social elites. Her crime, and mine, was one of perception. I was a man who worked with his hands. My fingernails were often rimmed with dirt. My wealth was not in stocks or titles, but in the living, breathing world I cultivated. To the Walcotts, my wife's family, I was a curiosity at best, a rustic novelty. At worst, a liability. The final, crushing blow came later that evening when I spoke to my wife, Catherine. I found her in our bedroom, laying out a shimmering, silver dress on the bed. It was for the wedding. "Isabel called," I said, my voice quiet. "I know," she replied, not meeting my eyes, her attention fixed on a tiny, invisible piece of lint on the dress. "She told me she was going to." I waited. The silence stretched, thick with everything she wasn't saying. "And you're okay with it?" I finally asked. "With her telling our daughter that she isn't good enough to watch her own aunt get married?" Catherine finally looked at me, her expression not of guilt, but of weary exasperation, as if I were a child who couldn't grasp a simple concept. "Liam, don't be so dramatic. It's not about Anya not being good enough. It's about optics. Isabel is marrying into the Devereaux family. They're surgeons, investment bankers. It's a different world. You have to admit, a man who digs in the dirt for a living, it doesn't exactly fit the picture. A man who digs in the dirt." The words were meant to diminish me, to reduce my life's work to a child's game in a sandbox. This, From the woman whose parents I had quietly saved from foreclosure a decade ago, after their own respectable business ventures had failed. The woman for whom I had co-signed the loan to start her boutique floral shop, a shop that was now, ironically, providing the arrangements for Isabel's elite wedding. For 20 years, I had been their rock, their silent support system. I was the one who drove her father to his chemotherapy appointments when no one else could be bothered. I was the one who fixed their leaky roofs and crumbling retaining walls, my labor given freely as an act of love, an act of family. And now, I was being dismissed with a casual, cruel wave of the hand. In that moment, watching Catherine smooth the folds of her silver dress, something inside me didn't break. It settled. It was the cold, quiet clarity of a winter morning, when the world is stark and true. For years, I had been trying to graft a branch of our life onto a tree that was fundamentally incompatible, a tree whose roots were shallow and fed by artifice. I had believed that love and loyalty could bridge any gap. I was wrong. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. The time for that was long past. I see, I said, my voice unnervingly calm. I walked over to the closet and pulled out a simple duffel bag. In that case, we won't be attending. She rolled her eyes, a gesture of supreme dismissal. Don't make this a bigger deal than it is, Liam. Try not to make it all about you. I'm not, I said softly, turning to leave the room. I'm making it about us. I walked downstairs to find Anya exactly where I had left her, sitting at the kitchen table. The sketchbook was closed. Her camera was in her hands, its lens pointed down, her fingers tracing its familiar shape. She looked up as I entered, her eyes asking the question she didn't dare to speak. What now? I sat down across from her, and for the first time, I told her the truth, not just about the wedding, but about everything. About the quiet sacrifices, the unspoken expectations, the long, slow erosion of respect. I told her not to make her bitter, but to make her understand. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she looked at me, her gaze clear and steady. So what are we going to do? We're going to prune, I said. It will hurt, but it's the only way to save what's still alive. And in the quiet weeks that followed, as the Walcotts celebrated and prepared for their grand affair, I began the slow, deliberate work of untangling our roots from their toxic soil. It was a quiet move, a change made not with an axe, but with the careful, precise cut of a surgeon. A change that, come Christmas, would cause their entire, carefully constructed ecosystem to collapse. The weeks following the wedding rejection were shrouded in a strange, muffled silence. From the Walcott side of the family, there was nothing. No follow-up calls, no awkward apologies, just the impenetrable quiet of people who have made a decision and see no reason to discuss it further. Catherine moved through our home like a ghost, our conversations shrinking to logistical necessities. Do we need milk? Anya has a dentist appointment on Tuesday. The silver dress hung in her closet, a shimmering accusation. Anya, meanwhile, retreated into her own world. The world of light and shadow she captured with her camera. She spent hours in the garden, photographing the intricate patterns of frost on a fallen leaf, the stoic resilience of the old oak tree at the edge of our property. She didn't speak of the wedding, but I saw the hurt in the way she held herself, a little more guarded, a little less open to the world. Her classmates, of course, asked questions. Isabel's wedding was a local society event, featured in the Oakhaven Gazette. When they asked Anya why she wasn't in any of the pictures, she would just shrug and say, I had a photography project I was working on. Her quiet dignity was a thing of heartbreaking beauty. I watched her, and the cold clarity I'd felt in my bedroom that night solidified into a quiet, unshakable resolve. This wasn't just about a wedding invitation. It was about the world my daughter was inheriting, the lessons she was learning about her own worth. I could not teach her to value herself if I did not value myself. So, I began my work. It wasn't born of anger or a desire for revenge. It was, as I told Anya, an act of pruning. For nearly 2 decades, I had allowed my resources, my time, my skills, my financial stability, to nourish the Walcott family tree. Now, it was time to redirect that nourishment back to my own roots. The first step was a visit to a quiet office downtown, the office of a man named Arthur Vance. Arthur was a discreet, older gentleman, a financial advisor who managed the Oakhaven Trust. The trust was something I had established 15 years ago, shortly after Anya was born. It was not a grand, ostentatious fund, but a quiet, steady source of support I had created out of a sense of duty and a promise. Years ago, Catherine's father, Robert Walcott, had been a different man. Before his business failed and his spirit soured, he'd been a man who appreciated craftsmanship. He admired my work, the way I could see the potential in a neglected piece of land. On his deathbed, he had taken my hand. "Liam," he'd whispered, his voice weak. "Look after them. They're good people, but they get dazzled by shiny things. They forget what's real. You're the real one. Promise me you'll be their anchor." I had promised, and the Oakhaven Trust was the fulfillment of that promise. I was the sole contributor, funding it with a portion of the earnings from my landscaping business, which was far more successful than the Walcotts ever imagined. They saw a man with dirt under his fingernails. They didn't see the long-term, high-value contracts with boutique wineries in the valley, the historical garden restorations for wealthy, private clients who valued discretion above all else. The trust was administered by Arthur, who, at my direction, had been quietly subsidizing the Walcotts' lifestyle for years. It paid the property taxes on Catherine's parents' sprawling, unmanageable house. It covered my younger cousin's exorbitant private school tuition. It had provided the seed money for Catherine's floral shop and a no-interest loan to her brother, David, for a tech startup that never seemed to start up. They knew the money existed, but they viewed it as a kind of magical family inheritance, a resource they were entitled to. They never asked about its source. It was simply there, a financial safety net that allowed them to live beyond their means and maintain the illusion of effortless affluence. I sat across from Arthur in his leather armchair, the scent of old books and lemon polish filling the air. "I need to make some changes to the trust, Arthur," I said. He nodded, his expression impassive. "I've been expecting your call, Liam. I read the announcement about Isabel's wedding in the paper. I did not see your or Anya's name mentioned among the family." Arthur was nothing if not observant. "I want to dissolve the current disbursement structure," I said. "Effective immediately. All payments to the Walcott family are to be suspended." He didn't flinch. "And the capital? I want it redirected. We're going to restructure the trust into a new entity. It will be called the Anya Kendrick Foundation." I explained my vision. It would be a small, private foundation dedicated to providing scholarships and grants for young artists, craftspeople, and tradespeople in the region. Kids like Anya, who had a gift but not the resources. Kids who, like me, worked with their hands and their hearts. Arthur listened patiently. When I was finished, a rare, small smile touched his lips. "A living legacy, Liam. A much better use of the soil, if you ask me. I'll draw up the paperwork." The second step was legal. I met with a family law attorney. I didn't want a contentious divorce. I wanted a dissolution. A clean, quiet separation. The Brambles, our home, had been in my family for 3 generations. I had inherited it long before I met Catherine. The legal groundwork to secure it as my sole and separate property was straightforward. The final step was the most personal. I booked a trip. For years, Anya had dreamed of visiting the great gardens of Japan, of studying the art of wabi-sabi, the beauty of imperfection. It was a trip I had always planned to take one day. I realized one day had to be now. I booked 2 tickets for the week after Christmas. As December approached, the first signs of the shift began to appear. Catherine came to me one evening, a frown on her face. "The property tax bill for my parents' house is overdue," she said, her tone accusatory. "The automatic payment didn't go through. You should probably have them call the bank," I said calmly, not looking up from the book I was reading. A few days later, it was her brother, David. He called my cell phone, his voice a frantic whine. "Liam, man, what's going on? The quarterly payment from the trust, it's not there. I've got payroll to make." "I'm not the administrator, David," I said politely. "You'll have to speak with Arthur Vance." The pressure was building, but they still hadn't connected the dots. They saw these as isolated clerical errors, not as the deliberate, systemic dismantling of the world they had taken for granted. They were about to. Christmas Eve at the Walcotts was a sacred tradition, a grand, formal affair at the family's old colonial home, a house they could no longer afford but clung to as a symbol of their legacy. This year, Catherine assumed we would go, that I would swallow my pride, that Anya would forget her hurt, and that we would all play our designated roles in the family pageant. "We should leave around 6, she said on the morning of Christmas Eve, the silver dress finally out of its garment bag. Anya and I won't be going, I said simply. She stared at me, her mouth agape. What do you mean you're not going? It's Christmas Eve. You can't just not go. We can't, I said. And we are. We have other plans. She didn't know what those plans were. She didn't know that in my desk drawer sat 2 plane tickets to Kyoto, an itinerary of temple gardens and pottery villages, and the newly minted charter for the Anya Kendrick Foundation. She didn't know that the foundation's first official act had been to send a single, elegant Christmas card to every member of her family. The card did not wish them a Merry Christmas. It was a simple, formal announcement. It stated, in graceful calligraphy, the formation of the Anya Kendrick Foundation, its mission to support young artisans, and its inaugural scholarship recipient, Anya Kendrick, for a study tour of Japanese landscape art. The card was designed to arrive on Christmas Eve. It was not an act of aggression. It was a statement of fact, a declaration of independence. It was me, telling them in the only language they truly understood, the language of status and formal announcements, that we had built our own world now. A world where we were not out of place. A world where we were the founders. That evening, as the Walcotts gathered in their drafty, oversized house, sipping champagne and wondering why their safety net had suddenly vanished, Anya and I sat by the fire at the Brambles. We ate pizza and watched old movies. The house was quiet, filled with a profound and healing peace. The first frantic call came from Catherine's mother around 9 o'clock. I let it go to voicemail. Then came a text from Isabel. What is this foundation? What have you done? Then a barrage of calls from David, each more panicked than the last. I didn't answer. I turned off my phone. I looked at Anya, who was watching the fire, a small, genuine smile on her face for the first time in weeks. Are you okay, Dad? She asked. I'm better than okay, I said, and I meant it. I'm free. The foundation had been pruned. The diseased branches had been cut away. And in the quiet, fire-lit warmth of our home, I could already feel the first stirrings of new growth. The silence of Christmas morning at the Brambles was a stark contrast to the storm that had been raging on my phone. When I finally turned it on, it was flooded with a deluge of missed calls and increasingly frantic texts. They ranged from the bewildered, Liam, what is going on? Mom, to the accusatory, you've ruined everything. Call me now. David, to the venomously self-righteous, I cannot believe you would use Christmas to be so vindictive. This is beyond cruel. Isabel. Catherine had left in a fury late on Christmas Eve after I refused to engage with her family's panic. She had gone to her parents' house, presumably to join the Council of War. I felt a pang of sadness for the woman I had once loved, but it was overshadowed by a profound sense of relief. The final tie had been severed. Anya and I spent the morning in the garden. It was a crisp, clear day, the kind of winter day in the Northwest where the air feels scrubbed clean and the sky is a brilliant, aching blue. We worked together, mulching the rose beds and wrapping the young Japanese maples in burlap to protect them from the coming frost. Our movements were synchronized and peaceful, a familiar rhythm. There was more life and truth in that shared, silent work than in 2 decades of forced holiday gatherings. Do you think they're mad? Anya asked, her voice small as she gently tied the twine around a slender tree trunk. I think they're scared, I replied, tamping down the mulch around the base of a rhododendron. It's not the same thing. Anger is a reaction to being wronged. Fear is a reaction to losing control. She nodded, understanding. Because you were the one holding everything up. We were, I corrected her gently. Your creativity, your spirit, that was part of it, too. They just never saw it. The full extent of their panic became clear the day after Christmas. Arthur Vance called me. Liam, he said, his voice dry as ever. I've been inundated with calls from the Walcott family. They seem to be under the impression that the trust is some sort of birthright. Their attorney has been in touch. And I asked. And I have politely informed him that the Oakhaven Trust, as established and funded solely by you, is a discretionary trust. You, the grantor, have full discretion to alter its terms and beneficiaries at any time. There is no legal recourse. They are, to use a technical term, out of luck. He paused. I must say, Liam, the charter for the Anya Kendrick Foundation is a thing of beauty. A much more fruitful investment. The Walcott's world began to unravel with surprising speed. Without the trust's subsidies, The facade of their affluence crumbled. Catherine's parents were forced to put their cavernous money pit of a house on the market. David's startup, which had been propped up by my funds for years, folded within a month, leaving a trail of angry investors and unpaid employees. Isabel's new husband, the elite surgeon, whose family valued appearances above all else, was reportedly less than thrilled to discover his new in-laws were not the landed gentry they pretended to be. The foundation of their world, it turned out, was built on my quiet, unacknowledged labor. And when I stepped away, the whole structure swayed. But the most significant development came not from a lawyer or a bank, but from Anya. A week after Christmas, she came to me with a large manila envelope. Inside were a series of stunning, black and white photographs she had taken. They were portraits of me, working in the garden. My hands, caked with soil. My face, etched with concentration. The lines of my back as I knelt to tend a patch of delicate hellebores. She had captured not a man who digs in the dirt, but an artist at work. "I want to submit these to the Pacific Northwest Youth Arts Showcase," she said, her voice firm with a newfound confidence. "The theme this year is dignity." Tears pricked my eyes. "Anya, they're beautiful." "I know," she said simply. "It's how I see you." This was her response. Not anger, not bitterness, but art. She was taking their ugly, reductive definition of me and transforming it into something beautiful and true. It was a more powerful statement than any legal document or financial maneuver. In the midst of this, Catherine reappeared. She showed up at the Brambles one rainy afternoon, looking smaller and more fragile than I had ever seen her. The defiance was gone, replaced by a raw, desperate fear. "Liam, please," she began, her voice cracking. "You have to stop this. My parents are going to lose their house. David, he's a mess. You're destroying them." I invited her in, made her a cup of tea, and we sat at the kitchen table where this all began. I looked at her, the woman I had shared a life with, and felt a deep, aching sorrow. "I'm not destroying anyone, Catherine," I said gently. "I've simply stopped propping them up. There's a difference. For 20 years, I was their anchor. But an anchor is meant to hold a ship steady, not to be dragged to the bottom. They were pulling me, and more importantly, they were pulling Anya down with them. But it's my family," she wept. "What am I supposed to do?" "The same thing I'm doing," I said. "Learn to stand on your own. Find out who you are without the titles, without the big house, without the safety net. Maybe you'll find you're stronger than you think." Is there no chance for us?" she asked, her eyes pleading. I reached across the table and briefly touched her hand. "The man you married, the one who would have done anything to fix things for you, he learned a hard lesson. He learned that he couldn't fix a foundation that was rotten from the start. And he learned that his first duty wasn't to his wife's family, but to his daughter. I can't go back to being that man, Catherine. I'm sorry." She left soon after, the teacup untouched. As I watched her walk away into the rain, I didn't feel triumph. I felt the profound grief of an ending, but also the quiet, clean hope of a new beginning. Anya's photographs won the grand prize at the Youth Arts Showcase. The judges praised her work for its profound emotional honesty and technical grace. Her artist's statement, which was printed alongside the exhibition, was simple and devastating. "My father is a gardener. He taught me that some things need to be cut back to grow stronger. He taught me that there is dignity in work done with love, and that a person's worth is not measured by what they own, but by what they cultivate." These photographs are my attempt to show him as I see him. As a creator, a protector, a man of substance. He is my father. He is my hero. A local newspaper picked up the story. It wasn't a sensational piece about family drama, but a thoughtful article about a young artist and her powerful tribute to her father. It was titled, "The Gardener's Hands." The story resonated in our small community. My business, already successful, saw a new wave of interest from clients who weren't just looking for a landscaper, but for an artist. They wanted the man from the photographs. Our trip to Japan was transformative. We walked through ancient moss gardens in Kyoto, the silence broken only by the sound of a distant temple bell. We watched potters in small, mountain villages shape clay with a reverence that felt like prayer. Anya filled sketchbook after sketchbook, her camera a constant extension of her eye. I saw the last traces of hurt fall away from her, replaced by the incandescent glow of inspiration. We were not just a father and daughter on vacation. We were two artists, two pilgrims, finding our way back to ourselves. One evening, sitting on the veranda of a traditional ryokan overlooking a koi pond, Anya turned to me. "I think I finally understand," she said. "Understand what, sweetheart? Why you did it? The trust, everything. It wasn't about punishing them. It was about planting something new." "Exactly," I said. "A garden for you." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "It's the most beautiful garden I've ever seen, Dad." We returned to Oak Haven in the early spring, a time of renewal. The world felt different, brighter. The Anya Kendrick Foundation had awarded its first round of scholarships, and I received a folder full of grateful letters from young people whose dreams we were helping to support: a welder, a weaver, a furniture maker. There was one final piece of business. The Walcott house had sold, for much less than they had hoped. Catherine's parents had moved into a small condo. David was working a retail job, trying to pay off his debts. Catherine had started taking classes at the local community college, studying horticulture. The irony was not lost on me. One afternoon, I received a letter. It was from Catherine. There were no pleas, no accusations. It was just a few short lines. "Liam, I went to see Anya's exhibit. The photographs are beautiful. You were right. I've been so busy trying to live up to a picture of what I thought life should be, I forgot how to see the real thing. I'm starting over. I'm trying to learn how to grow things. I hope, one day, I can cultivate a life as beautiful as the one you've built. Be well, Catherine." I folded the letter and put it away. It wasn't a reconciliation, not in the traditional sense. But it was something more valuable, an acknowledgement. A seed of understanding planted in barren ground. My life now is quiet, but it is full. The brambles is thriving. The Anya Kendrick Foundation is growing, its roots spreading throughout our community. Anya is preparing for college, her portfolio of work earning her offers from some of the best art schools in the country. Sometimes, in the quiet of the evening, I walk through my garden. I run my hands over the rough bark of the old oak tree, and I think about roots, about resilience, about the hidden strength that lies dormant, waiting for the right conditions to grow. I learned that family is not always about blood. It is about who you choose to nourish, and who, in turn, nourishes you. And I learned that the most important work a man can do is not to build an empire for the world to admire, but to cultivate a small, quiet garden where his child can safely and beautifully bloom. This was not a story of revenge. It was a story of reclamation. I did not destroy their world. I simply chose to stop watering it, and instead, to tend my own garden. And in doing so, I found a legacy far richer and more enduring than any they could have ever imagined.